Thank you, Rich, and ladies and gentlemen. Before I get into talking about Pete, I need to talk about a young lady who's sitting down here in the audience. And that young lady's name is Alice Dye. And last week I was at a meeting on Thursday at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and my secretary kept coming into me and says, "There's a lady on the phone who would like to speak to you." And I said, "I'll take a message and I'll give her a call back." About 40 minutes later, my secretary comes back in to the meeting and says, "Excuse me, this lady's still on the phone and she'd like to speak to you now." I said, "Who is that?" And she said, "It's Alice Dye." I said, "Okay, just tell her I'll call her back in a few minutes." So about 40 minutes later, I go back there and I call up Alice. And Alice said, "Greg, we'd like you to come and introduce Pete for his induction into the Hall of Fame." And she said, "You're our number 2 choice." And I said, "Boy, Alice, you really know how to make me feel good." And so she explained, and Dean Beeman, and Dean, I know unfortunately you couldn't be here tonight, and we wish you all the very best for your recovery from your surgery. But Alice, in her wonderful style, in her directness, and very poignant approach towards "get your ass here," was there. And this is what I love about Alice and Pete Dye. They've been a team beyond all teams. And if the World Hall of Fame could induct 2 people in one time, Alice should be up here with Pete at the same time. But that's no slight on Pete. We all know Pete Dye. For some of us who've played his golf courses and some of us who haven't played his golf courses, he's been a player who has really tested us. He's been a designer who's really tested us even more. And for those of you who have played with Pete Dye, I don't know how he can be such a brilliant architect, because he is the worst golfer God had ever put on this planet. All he does do is hit low, flat snap hooks. And for him to build these golf courses with such small greens, such penal bunkers, is beyond my imagination. But it's a true testament to the individual that he really is. I got my love for golf course design from Pete. I got my love from golf course design by the attitude and the approach he took me down. He taught me, "Greg, you know what? Everybody looks at the green grass. They look at how fast the greens are, how good the tees are, put a flag in the green, put the tee markers on the tee, and they go play. They never really look what happens underneath that grass." And Pete taught me an invaluable lesson about subsurface structure of golf course construction. And Pete is a genius. Pete is a genius with the environment. He's a genius the way he protects the environment. And he's a genius the way he creates the irrigation and creates drainage. And beyond all that, Pete has the wisdom to be able to picture golf shots in his mind that he's going to test the best players in the world. And in 1993, I was down there collaborating with Pete at the Medalist Golf Club. And just before I left the Medalist Golf Club, I said to Pete, "You know what, I think I'm going to go up to there, to Jacksonville, to that golf course you call the TPC at Sawgrass." I said, "I'm going to shoot an extremely low number up there." I can't even remember whether I said 24 under. And he looked at me and says, "Ha, sure you will." And I couldn't wait to get back to Pete, and I said, "Okay, Pete, is that all you got?" And but at the end of the day, our relationship has gone on and on and on. And it's an honor for me to be standing up here to introduce Pete. He's a sprightly, as Pete says, half 166. He's been around the game of golf more than many of us sitting down here, and many of us have played. And as I've said, and I read in a book one time where Pete said, "Golfers love to be punished." And how true is that? How many of us out here really love to play the game of golf, but get very bored when you play a very boring golf course? Pete has the ability to make you remember every shot you've played for the 18 holes you played that day. And that's a very, very rare talent indeed. He designs golf courses that challenges the best players in the world. He designs golf courses that everybody loves to play. Pete, welcome to the World Hall of Fame. You are truly an inspiration to me. You've been an inspiration as a professional and also as a friend. And Pete, welcome.
See that big book I brought here tonight? And Rich and Greg said enough about me. Maybe it's cold enough. Maybe we all should just go home. But really, I surely wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my mom and dad. So I got to thank them. They're the ones that got me here, some way or another. I don't know what they did, but something happened. But really, you know, two of our inductees tonight, Denny Shute and Herbert Wynn. I'm the only one around here, been around long enough, I knew them both. But Denny Shute used to make exhibitions during World War II. And as I was a kid there, we used to go out and watch him play. He was really great. And then when I was working in the Dominican Republic, this Herbert Warren Wynn showed up down there to do an article in Golf Digest. And boy, was I elated. This man was pretty well known. He's going to write about me. I thought it was wonderful. So he's down there and he asked me all these different questions and went around and around and around. And finally he left. And the article came out. And about the second sentence in there, he said, Pete Dye is totally illiterate in 2 languages. He said Spanish and English. So if you want to go, now's the time. But last night, really, it was really a great night. There were 67 young men that had been pushing dirt with me for the last few years, came in to St. Augustine. They had a little dinner, a meeting, and some of them came all the way from Greece. Another one came from Seattle, so they're all there. They were great people. And they're the guys that have really pushed me to this point. And also, I want to thank my bride. And we've been here. I thought 58. It's almost 59 years now. See, so we've been hanging pretty good. And the 2 boys out there, Peavy and Perry Dye, both members of the American Society of Golf Architect. They've been digging up other people's property just like me. Well, we've had a great time, and Greg, I still don't know how you ever shot that score up here, and I never will get over it. But it really, I've come back to the TPC 5 times now to rebuild it, and maybe if I hang around a little longer, Mr. Fincham, we can do it one more time. I might get it right the next time. But it's really, really fun, and my dad, have to get back to him. In 1923, he had never played golf, and his car broke down going through Pennsylvania, and he had to stop there, and there was a little 9-hole golf course, and he had to wait on his car to be fixed, and so he hit these golf balls, and he got hooked. And he didn't have much experience, but the following year, he went back to a little town of Urbana, Ohio, and I can always hear my dad say, I'm from Urbana, Ohio. Columbus is just east of Urbana, Dayton's just south of Urbana. But everything was from Urbana as far as he was concerned. And he built a little 9-hole golf course on some land my mother's family owned. They got a group together there, and Peavy came back and he built the second 9-hole in '93. Urbana's a very conservative little town. We don't move too fast there. But my dad, he had got a group of men, and it was a little private club, and it was doing quite well. And when I arrived in the world, I first remember just going out there he gave me a job, and I got a hose, and you watered the greens with just a garden hose. And so I stayed there, and I worked on that golf course every summer until the start of the war. And at that time, the superintendent, or greenkeeper at that time, had to go to defense plants. So at 16, I'm now the greenkeeper of the Urbana Country Club. And I surely know all the things, everything about it. And somehow or another, I was able to kill all the greens. And my father wasn't too pleased about that, so he shipped me off to the Army in 1944. Thought this get me on the way, and I ended up in the parachute infantry. And I like to tell everybody how I won the war, but really all I did was jump out over Georgia and North Carolina. And somehow another way, when we got to North Carolina, I ended up at Fort Bragg, and Mr. Truman did a little something to stop the war, and I had 6 months to stay in. So they didn't want to jump anymore, so I'm now the greenkeeper at the Fort Bragg golf course, and didn't really have any trouble there because they had sand greens, and I couldn't kill them. So I had a great time. I went over to see Mr. over at Pinehurst every day. Played golf course over at Pinehurst number 2 for 6 solid months. And I got to know Mr. Ross, and he had built the Fort Bragg golf course, and he said, well, don't do much damage to those greens over there. And I said, no, we'll hang in there. But I got to know him quite well, and he would come over and watch us play golf, and most of the captain and the colonel that hauled me over there, they didn't know who Mr. Ross was, but the other fellow walking with him was J.C. Penney. They all knew him. So after the war, really this is a great thing tonight. I'm really pleased, but the greatest thing that ever happened to me in 1950, I married Alice O'Neill, and then we're off again. Here we go. And I started peddling life insurance. I had to leave Urbana and go to Indianapolis. I couldn't stay in Urbana. I had to go to her town. So she got me into the country club of Indianapolis, and then I decided somehow or another to kill all the grass there too. So somehow or another, a farmer south of Indianapolis wanted to build a golf course, and he called us and talked to us, and he didn't have any money, so he said, why don't you kids come down and build it for us? So we went down and we built the Eldorado 9 holes, and we thought we had the second coming of Oakmont. We really did. And Alice made a little card, sent it out to all our friends, and she sent one to Mr. Tufts, who was owned Pinehurst and a past president of the United States Golf Association. And Mr. Tufts wrote a real nice letter back to it and said, you know, it's wonderful you kids to build this 9-hole golf course, but don't you think crossing the creek 13 times in 9 holes is a little too much? So the real reason we're standing here tonight is from the University of Michigan, Dr. Harlan Hatcher. And not very many people know the University of Michigan, Harlan Hatcher graduated from Ohio State. But he was a Scotsman, and he was driving down from Ann Arbor through Indianapolis. And being a Scotsman, he saw that little sign, this 9 holes. And he was about the best, a 20 handicap player, Dr. Hatcher. And I want to assure you that Ben Hogan and Bob Jones and Tiger and Greg, you've had a couple good rounds too. But the greatest round of golf probably ever played was by Dr. Hatcher when he got around those 13 creeks. And somehow or another, he'd been talking to Trent Jones and Dick Wilson to build a second course for the University of Michigan. And he called me, and I went up there, and somehow or another, I ended up building the Michigan golf course. That was the first one. And at that time, all I knew was Trent Jones, so I made big long tees and big old greens and big high flashing bunkers. And so I'd run into Mr. Jones later on in life, and he would say, well, Pete, you've done some pretty good work, but really I think that course you built for the University of Michigan is your best. And at the same time, I was at Michigan, there was the old course there right next to the stadium, and I didn't know who this guy was, but his name was Dr. McKenzie. Later found out that, you know, he had built a few good golf courses, Augusta and a couple others, you know. So I went over and looked at his greens, and they were unusual looking greens I'd ever seen. I said, well, why am I copying Mr. Jones? This guy over here, he's got a different style. So I got a chance to build back in Indianapolis. Nobody else would hire me, so Alice optioned some ground and raised some money, and we started Crooked Stick. So I brought the 2 greens from the University of Michigan. That's a few people out there, the Crooked Stick, that's the 14th and the 15th, that belonged to Mr. McKenzie. So I built Crooked Stick, and it's been a great club, and we've lived there, and that's kind of where we got it started. And the members there have been wonderful. They've had every USJ tournament that you can imagine. They had the Solheim Cup, and they're going to have the USGA Senior next year, and they're going to FedEx down the line, Mr. Fincham, I hope. And but Crooked Stick, the members there have been wonderful, and I understand a lot of you out here tonight. I can't believe you come all the way to Jacksonville. You don't talk to me when I'm home. But really, what happened to me at Crooked Stick years ago when we got going, a young boy used to caddy for me. His name was Mickey Powell, and he became president of the PGA, and they were talking, and somehow or another Mickey got the PGA to go to Crooked Stick. You were there, Greg. You know, I had that course set up for you. And then this guy, John Daly, came along, and he just could carry everything just a little bit, you know. And John won the tournament at Crooked Stick in 1991. And the same year, I got a chance to go back in the ocean course at Kiowa. And I remember when I got to Kiowa and looked at it, I think it was 1988, and they came to me and said, well, we're going to have the Ryder Cup at Kiowa. And I'm looking out at a piece of ground that hadn't even it was just nothing there. And Hugo was coming too. I didn't know that either. And we finally got the Ryder Cup there, and Hale Irwin sneaked through the last day, and it was a great tournament. And the Ryder Cup so I had Crooked Stick and Ryder Cup at the same time. Well, that was a real thrill, but what happened after all this, Harbor Town came along, and Jack Nicklaus called me, and Jack said, you know, they want to build a golf course at Harbor Town. So, well, we went down and talked to them, and the routing at Harbor Town was made by Mr. Cobb. They had already routed the golf course, and so Charles Fraser finally said we could build it, and Jack had an airplane, so that made it easier getting back and forth. And Alice and I moved there, so we're doing all right. And Charles Price, the golf writer, came out and said, you know, they're going to have a PGA Championship. Well, we started building the golf course in November, and Charles came out, and I said, well, fine, they're must going to be having it on the ocean course. And kept going along, and all of a sudden they came back and said, no, they're going to have it on your course. I said, well, we haven't even got it cleared, and they're going to have it in November. Well, anyhow, we try to accelerate the thing, and Jack would come back, and he'd want to change something. He said, now the 15th hole build this kind of green. I said, Jack, that's only 2,500 square feet. He said, that's big enough. He said, I'm the only one going to get over those trees at that green, and I'm going to just put it there so nobody else can get there. I said, fine. So going behind all this, I was getting a little back, and my bride was there, Alice was there, and I said to Allie, I said, you know, we're getting behind, and this tournament's coming down the line. I said, there's a good bulldozer operator named Teepee. Can you take him over to the 13th hole, and can't you do something? So she disappears and goes over there, and I came back with a couple, 3 or 4 days later, and here the tees are built, and the bunkers are built, and the greens all in there. And she was smarter than I am. She didn't use those doggone old railroad ties. She put cypress boards all around the outside of the bunker. So I was there the day of the tournament started, and I was putting the sand in the bunker that day. And then I kept looking down the fairway, and finally here comes the first golf professional. So we got out of the bunker and tamped it down, and I went to the back of the green to kind of watch these two fellows play, and I had coveralls on and looked about like this, not a little better tonight, but I was there. And 2 guys were standing back there, and they're talking, and one said, the other said, isn't this a lovely golf hole that Jack Nicklaus built? Well, I said, looked at him, I said, Jack Nicklaus didn't have anything to do with that hole. I said, a lovely young lady built that hole. And they kind of stared at me, and I walked away, and I heard the one guy say to the other, said, there goes an early morning drunk for you. So I don't know how this all happened, and Dean called me, and Mr. Beeman called me and told me they're trying to build a golf course here in Jacksonville. So we came up, and we looked at all this nice sandy ground around Jacksonville, and came around, and all of a sudden, he says, I think I got a good deal over here for some land, and I want you to meet this fellow by the name of Vernon Kelly. And Mr. Kelly came out, and eventually became a pretty good friend. But the first time I met Mr. Kelly, Vernon Kelly took me to this property, and he had a special way to go around to get into the middle of this property, and he found the only dry spot on 400 acres. And he said, look at this tree coverage. I said, you can't even see. I said, so Dean made a great deal, and he bought the land for $1. I don't know why he ever paid him that. But anyhow, we started out, and I brought a young superintendent named Dave Postlethwaite. Dave came there, and I forgot the guy told me to stand up. And we started digging, and 6 months later, I was about ready to call Dean and say, Dean, I don't think we're ever going to get out of here alive. I don't think so. But finally, we got her done, and then the TPC was really on the austerity program because Dave Postlethwaite was a great building superintendent. He ran a bulldozer and track hoe. He could do everything. He was really a marvelous person. And then, well, for somehow or another, now he's the greenkeeper, and he's never cut a blade of grass in his life. But the first year we got out alive, Jerry Pate won the tournament, and of course puts Dean in the pond, and I never thought he was going to push me, but he did. And we got by the first year okay, but the second year they cut the greens down a little, got a new superintendent, Bobby Weed, and they cut the greens a little shorter. And they had a revolution down here. They were ready to kill me then. The second year was really bad. But I really appreciate Dean who let me come back. And we've gone over the greens, and Bobby Weed, we softened them, we've pushed them around, we've done this. And then Mr. Fincham let me come back again this year. A couple of years ago, we went over the Tournament Players Club one more time. And we're doing, I think, a little better. And people are not quite so mad. And it's draining a little better and so forth, but I really appreciate coming back. But the only thing I got to think, been back here 5 times doing it, we should have 90 holes, we just still got 18, but so forth. And then after the revolution at the Tournament Players Club, I sneaked off down the Dominican Republic, and I went down there and to build a golf course, and they wanted to build in the capital, and I finally convinced them to go out in the country. They had a big sugar place out there, but they didn't have a paved road within 35 miles. And I kept saying, well, look, if we can build a golf course, people will finally get here somehow or another. So they let me start building a golf course out there. And one of the vice presidents came up after I'd been there about 3 or 4 months, and he kind of stuttered. He said, Pete, today I can't speak Spanish or English. He says, we own over almost 500,000 acres down here, and you're not even building on our property. Well, the owners now, Mr. Van Hool and Mr. Lima, have been putting up with me since 1970. I don't know why they haven't shot me, but they have. And if I hold on long enough, I build 9 more holes. I got 9 holes under construction down there, and if I do, they're going, Mr. Fincham, they will have 90 holes. They will have 90 holes down there. So anyhow, after we got back of all this, I know that there are 3 people out here that are the trustees of your organization, and I've been built a golf course for all of them. And Mr. Evans now has the Oak Tree, and I had my first major championship at Oak Tree, and it's kind of falling apart. We may have to go back and do a little pushing there. And Mr. Kohler's out there. I've been pushing his stuff around for so long that he's we're still speaking, though, just barely, but we're still speaking, see. But he's going to have the PGA Championship in 10 and 15, and hopefully I hope we get to see, or somebody setting this up and tells us what happened to the Ryder Cup in 2020. And then Mr. Goodman is here, and he's got the Ocean Course where we had the Ryder Cup, and we're going to have the PGA Championship in 2012. So I hope you people, how many people have forgotten now, Allie? Almost all of them? Well, right now, I got a new member, Mr. Cook and Mr. Ferguson. They have bought the old French Lick Resort in southern Indiana. That's where Larry Bird was from. And they've done a great job, restored the whole area down there, and they've given me the highest point in Indiana to build a golf course. And I know they think I should be done by now, but we're just a little late and just a little over budget. But we hope to have the PGA has come by, and they said they're going to have their club professional championship there in the year 2010. And they have the old Donald Ross golf course was built there in 1917, which Walter Hagen won the PGA championship in 1924, and Mickey Wright won the LPGA down there in 1960. Well, a good friend of mine, Lee Smith, came in and rebuilt the old Ross course and left the greens just like they were in 1917, and the mounds and this. So now here's a golf course that has the contour that from back to front, and the greens roll 5 and 6 feet, and the Bermuda grass in the fairways. And I have this other one up on top of the hill. Hopefully that they'll have a stimp meter reading of 12, and then they'll go down and play the one that Mr. Ross built at 6 on the stimp meter. And then on Bermuda grass, they go to bent. In time the club professionals get rid of that, there'll probably be another rebellion. Thanks a lot. Great to be here. Proud to be here. Thank you.